So you ladies are doing well? Everything's going okay?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're all ready for a little bit of R&R, but it's been good. It was nice to, have a little bit of turkey day and eat my weight. Definitely did that.
Yeah, we definitely did that. We managed to find a good small turkey this year, and it's amazing. They actually thought through that part of the process, and without getting into too much, we'd read that they realized that a lot of smaller families were going to be having at-home Thanksgivings versus getting together or friendsgivings, which is what we used to do.
Yeah,
And so they actually had intentionally had smaller turkeys versus the ginormous options.
yeah. Probably less hormones too, which is never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing. Yeah, absolutely. I have good news for you and bad news. The good news is I'm not going to stuff you full of a lot of hormones. The bad news, on the other hand,
The leftovers will be less.
yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. Looks like we have some folks joining. Good to see you. Eddie, your Christmas tree looks so pretty in the background.
Thank you.
It does. Very nice.
Beautiful.
We were just talking about this. I don't suppose somebody could put a little tinsel around really you could do some great silvery tinsel around this pragmatic backdrop. It wouldn't even have to be holiday specific, just a little bit of decoration, maybe a couple of silver balls on top of the plant. I'm thinking we need a seasonal edit.
Yeah. Maybe some of those dancing elves in the background, and you can put your friend's face on it. Going past.
Yeah, there you go.
Every 5 minutes, they just go in the background.
That would be interesting. We really ought to, just on an ongoing basis, there should be something like a little spider or like a bug that flies around the light, just so it freaks people out. Is that real? Is that her house? Did she actually redo her whole house like that?
Yeah. Dedicated fan.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Well, look, it looks like we're a small but mighty group today, but welcome everybody. It's great to have you. We missed you last week. I know that we have our friends near and far, but for those in the States, hopefully you had a safe and healthy holiday. Diane, how was your Thanksgiving? What did you guys end up doing?
Well, we had a very small Thanksgiving, just Tom and myself, and we had a really good time. We had very nice food, we had lovely wine, and we started watching our Christmas movies. So we always start with Miracle on 34th Street. So we started with that, transitioned Thanksgiving into our holiday season is Christmas. And so we kicked that off. So it was fun. How about you?
Yeah, same, very small, but fun. Saw a couple of friends and, we just did the whole turkey thing. To your point, great wine. I mean, I think that that's always a lovely way to accompany that huge meal. So it was good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, we just, thank you, Diane. We always appreciate when you're here. I love like the insightful conversations and how we were talking about your great visual examples. So we're happy to pick your brain here. I know that we are going to be a little consolidated. We'll probably end a little early today, just as folks are, moving on to other things. I mean, I know we're all busy bees as the season's coming to an end. But in the meantime, before we dive in, I just wanted to do a little plug about our annual survey. We really want to hear your voice and your opinions matter. So we invite you to take our annual survey. This actually happens now through December 18th. It's so important just because it truly offers valuable insights into the world of product management and product marketing, whether it's like what trends we're seeing, how things are shifting, what our counterparts are earning. All of this valuable, usable information comes from these surveys. So, and I think that this year's will be especially valuable just with all the chaos that has been happening and as we kind of have worked through this last year. So, folks want to come and fill out that survey, they can find it on our website. I think Sarah's going to pop it into the chat here. They can find it on our social channels, but, we certainly want to hear from you. And again, that runs until December 18th. So Diane, let's get rolling. I have your first question here, and it surrounds willingness to pay. This one comes from Sam, and he says, I'm interested in the idea of a customer's willingness to pay, but what are some other ways we can decipher our different segments' willingness to pay without having to come out and ask them?
I love that question. Teaching price class is one of my very favorites, although I do say that about every class, but price is exciting in that way because this concept of willingness to pay is something that a lot of organizations don't think about as early as they ought to. And really, this is one of those earliest questions. That's why we have it as one of the 3 evaluators of any market problem that you find, because willingness to pay has got to be there. Otherwise, you get all the way to building a product, taking it out to market. That's not when you want to find out. So it's a really good question. Like, how do you find out if you can't actually ask them, what are you willing to pay for this product? And we all know when you ask that question, they lie, right? I mean, I lie. Who lies when you're asked that question? Yeah, I think I should get it for free. I think it should be bundled in with something else. So there are a lot of techniques to do pricing on willingness to pay. So a lot of it depends on whether your product is brand new or whether you have some competition. And you don't want to do Me Too pricing any more than you want to do something like cost plus. Those are both very bad ways to price. But what do you do if your product is brand new? A really good idea is to go out to the market and ask them about something slightly around the question of what would you pay for this. Ask them about the problem and what kind of pain it causes them. Can they quantify it? Is it a pain that actually is resulting in their business losing money? Or is it draining profits? Is it a compliance issue? They would actually have to stop selling in certain markets because they're non-compliant. Those are all wonderful things to find out because you can almost always put a dollar value on those and just say, maybe 10% of that, somewhere between 10 to 50% is a good benchmark. What if you can't though? What if there just isn't really a quantifiable benefit? Then you've got to get them to start talking about, is this more important to them than something else that they have or less important? So get something you can fix. Let's say, for example, I sell baby bottle warmers. And so, Callie, I'm just going to ask you a question. So you're a new mother, Callie. We're going to go along with that. Baby bottle warmers, they're something that we have. What about a car seat, though? Is a baby bottle warmer more important to you than a car seat, or is it less important?
Less.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me. So how much did you pay for your car seat? And just make up a price.
$150.
$150. Okay, well, so what about an actual bottle? Just a bottle you would use, maybe a plastic bottle to put water in the evening versus the bottle sanitizer and warmer. Is that more important or less important?
More important.
Okay, so how much did you pay for that disposable bottle?
$7.
Okay, now those are pretty wide ranges, but if you start to hone in on that, you're having a conversation about price that helps you get a sense for your product's value in a spectrum of value. That's a great way to talk about price without actually saying, how much would you pay for this product?
That's a great idea.
Other things to do. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying that's a great idea. It makes complete sense. Yeah.
If you've got competition, you certainly don't want to just mimic their pricing, but you can always have a conversation through win-loss interviews, the gift that keeps on giving, win-loss interviews. What were some of the elements that the competition had that you didn't? What are some of the things that we had that they didn't? Get a sense for what those are and the relative value. Sometimes it's great to do an exercise called a zero-sum scale. You've seen this probably, people, if you watch any sort of political analysis or economic analysis, a lot of times they'll say, if you were to make a bet, if you had $1 and you had these 5 options, where would you put your money? So you only have this $1, but you can split it up into, let's say, nickels or pennies. That's a really great way to get a sense for the valuation of features and problems you solve that the competition doesn't, and things they have that you don't. Say, well, if you had $1 and you could break it into pennies or nickels, how would you value those things? It's a great way to just remove that whole concept of a direct discussion of price it's amazing how quickly people actually forget and forget that you're really going to use that to help you price your product. But
Yeah.
it's always about willingness to pay. Always, always, always. The last thing you want to do is build a product and say, okay, well, we spent this much building it, so we have to charge that. Chances are out in the market, they've got a really good idea, even whether they can articulate it or not, whether or not they're willing to pay a certain price. It's pretty easy to go get an order of magnitude on that before you build, which is the time to do it.
Great. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And welcome to those who've just joined us. Hi there, some familiar faces.
Yeah, Alika, hi. Alika was in one of my classes.
Yeah, and I think you are the one who suggested to use the strategic product mix.
Mm-hmm.
I used it, and amazingly, I got buy-in from one of the biggest naysayers of what I was trying to do. we ended up using it. In fact, I presented it on the GM staff call. So these are all directors and senior directors that attend that. And so thank you, because I couldn't find the right template that this guy was buying into, but he actually warmed up to that, and now has kind of become a big advocate and champion.
Amazing.
Oh, that is so great to hear. I love that. Yeah, what Alika is referring to is the strategy matrix. And I just want to make sure it's a strategy matrix, right?
Yep.
And the focus on 4, the lightning strike strategy that we talk about in focus class. So if you haven't taken focus class, that's where we talk about it. But the strategy matrix is in the Alumni Resource Center / Pragmatic Alumni Community. And so the actual template is right there. If you're ever interested in it and you are an alumni of any of the Pragmatic classes, you can go get that template. That's one of my favorites, honestly. It was one of those that changed a lot of the courses of discussions for me too. So I'm really glad that worked out for you.
Fantastic. Yeah, Alika, we were just chatting. We have an accelerated discussion today. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. But I will move along with, and it's interesting, Diane, I feel like we had a similar question probably a few weeks back, but they're talking about, is there a rule of thumb or best practices for how long we should be talking to our market before we move forward with creating either a new product, a new feature? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question, especially if you've already got a product that's very, very close to launch, or you've got products that are out in the market, but how long should we talk to the market before we get something out there? The short answer is this should be an ongoing conversation. So the cycle of discovery and validation should be happening on an ongoing basis. So I don't want you to do analysis paralysis. I don't want you to wait around too long. It's often better to get even a very rough mock-up of a product out into the market, or start discussing how you think you'd solve the problem to get reactions, and then maybe build a very basic prototype and have people test it. So keep those short, tight iterations going all through the process. That way you continue to make progress. Also, in my world, what I always did was sort of a cost benefit. For example, if I were going to offer consulting features when I already had a software product, maybe I already had people in-house who had the best practices, who could do that work, I'd go to a pilot right away and start learning, because the cost wasn't very high. You could stand it up and set it down if it didn't work. If you've got to build hardware where you're going to build out a line for a product, you certainly want to do at least one round of prototyping out in the market, because it's just too expensive to build out a line, to set up a supply chain, and then find out that nobody really wanted it the way you built it. So I would take those things into account. But the short answer is don't wait too long. Make sure you've got a problem that is urgent, pervasive, and willing to pay. And then get something in the market that says, here, this is how we think we would solve that problem. What do you think? Here's actually a prototype. What do you think of that? So keep that cycle going. But if you've got urgent, pervasive, willing to pay, you're good to go.
Yeah, great. This next one comes from a bare bones startup company. And they ask, we're a bare bones startup, app company, and really just a group of friends with a killer idea who are looking to begin to develop our product roadmap. For a company starting from the ground up who doesn't have much experience, how would you suggest we begin to build it out? And that comes from Mariah.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, Mariah, congratulations.
Exciting.
There's nothing more exciting than a startup. Honestly, it's so much fun. Sometimes even within a big organization, if you can just do that little piece to the side where you're going into new markets, it's so cool. So when you talk about that roadmap and what do we need to do to put that roadmap together if you don't have any experience, the one thing I would say is validate in the market. So chances are, if you're a startup, you've got this killer idea because one of you either had the problem or you know somebody who had the problem. So this is either something that frustrated you directly, drove you crazy, or somebody you know. And so you've probably got really direct experience right now. When you start to build that roadmap, when you pull yourself out of that situation and you start serving that market, then you have to be more formal about actually talking to them. So I would start that right now. And so however you got that killer idea, wherever that came from, I would go back to whatever group that was and say, okay, well, if I solve this problem, what would I want next? If this problem went away, or if I had this happiness, what would I want next? Because particularly if you are a startup, unless you're self-funding and see that happening forever, when you go to venture capitalists or private equity companies, and even angel investors in that small phase, they're going to want to see that you've got that business plan. So you're very smart to have the idea now that you're going to need that roadmap, because you're going to have to tell a story to your investors about where you go from that one killer idea. I'm assuming, though, that you've already validated in the market urgency, pervasiveness, and willingness to pay on the killer idea. If you haven't done that, I would do that before I even put another roadmap together. But if you have, ask what's next for them. What's the next logical thing? I actually did this years ago. I had a consumer good that I had put out in the market and patented. And the idea was to cover shelves. So the wire shelves, things fall through wire shelves, they get stuck, it's messy. It's this really simple product. But the whole idea was, okay, that's great, but this is just this really incredibly simple product that lays on top of the shelf, attaches with Velcro. What next? And there were several different business plans to move on from that. One of them was subscription to closet organization. Another one was, okay, these things are for closets. What about doing them in refrigerators and other storage units? So think about that. What's next? Is it a service? Is it expanding into new markets? Is it expanding the options on the product itself? Those are usually avenues to take with whatever killer idea you've got to go forward. But the best way to do it is, of course, ask the market.
Yeah. And actually, here's another question that kind of piggybacks off that a little bit, who's also looking for, ways to validate, right? This one comes from Dave, and he says, how can we validate that our product design is where it needs to be? We have a prototype, but we don't have the resources to get a large test group and feel with our product specifically, customers need to actually use it to recognize its value. Any advice?
Well, I guess my natural advice would be to get a group to do this. So the question is, with a lack of resources, how could you do that? So you do need to get it out to people if they need to use it. My question to you would be, are there associations, groups, clubs, or other influencers you could go to who do have access to those groups? Anything from the American Dental Association to the American Scientist Group, IEEE, or Comic-Con. It just depends on what group you're trying to access. Think about, do they have clubs, associations, organizations, societies? Are there people who influence those groups? They probably have access to the audience. And sometimes you can do that for financial consideration. Sometimes they're just really excited to get new things in the hands of their membership. That might be a way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way, just finding where those people are puddling together and you can kind of, two birds, one stone type of thing, right?
Especially in the virtual environment right now, people are hungry for that kind of work. If, they're not getting together in person, but if you could do a big hackathon online, the good news is there are some pretty decent tools out there to do that now. So I would explore that. That's what I would do.
Great. Yeah, and just to everyone who's on our call, we have Diane for about another 10 minutes or so. So feel free to pop those questions in the chat. We certainly always want to hear from you.
Oh, I've got a win-loss question.
Yeah, Alika, go ahead.
So we actually have an enterprise product office. We're trying to get traction. I work for a firm that has about 40,000 people. I don't know how many BUs there actually are. But anyhow, we partnered with them. Myself and the client manager leader partnered with them to put it together a win-loss program. I already know its value because I've been taking pragmatic courses and I'm aware of the framework. So we got the product leaders on this week and introduced it. And it was interesting because one of the product leaders said, well, why would you have, was kind of claiming that between sales, client management, or account management and product, product still has a bias. And I said, well, technically you're correct. But of those three groups, it has the least amount of bias and is in the strongest position to get the most objective win-loss from an interview with a client. Your thoughts?
Well, and it's not even a question of bias. It's a question of who is supposed to be doing it because it's part of their job. And while sales is a great help with this, and other departments can be a great help, and they're going to bring back information, win-loss and Nihito information, they've got a job to do. I mean, if our salespeople are actually spending a lot of time, this is one of the reasons why salespeople don't bring a lot of that information back in any formalized way, because they've got the whole job to do that's called sales. Mm-hmm. Same thing with other teams, whether you're customer support or implementation teams, the legal team that negotiates the contract. Those folks all have their job. That's why the job of the product team is to be the experts on the market. So whether it's the buyers or the users, whether it's one group or two groups who are responsible for those jointly or separately, somebody's got to be responsible for aggregating all that knowledge. And so if one group is responsible for bringing the communication in with firsthand knowledge, they've also got to be responsible for aggregating it. Now, sales can't be responsible for that. Customer support can't be responsible for that. They do have a lot of great firsthand knowledge. On the other hand, they're not talking to everybody. They're certainly talking to prospects, they're certainly talking to customers, but they're not talking to the people who aren't buying right now. They're not looking for changes in those roles. They're looking to sell something right now. Their window is supposed to be right now.
Yeah.
But
okay.
The product team is looking ahead. What's changing? What's going to be different next year? What are you worried about?
Well, and our nuance in our space is that we probably have like 50% of the market share. So we've even been asking ourselves, how many new logos do we really need to go get versus penetrating the existing healthcare systems, which Tenet is comprised of 230 hospitals. So, we've been asking ourselves just how many new logos do we need to, grow by, let's say, 6 to 10% year over year. So,
and I think that's a great question, Alika, because this is a situation where you can't do everything anyway. So if win-loss isn't the thing to do, this still should be the gathering of the market knowledge of the market problems is still the province of the product team.
Yeah, well, and where we, and I said partnering with the product office, where we kind of landed with these product leaders is to say, really view this as an extension of voice of customer. It's really taking a particular deal that we didn't or did get, but it still is fall under voice of customer.
Well, and is there, so you're talking about the product team maybe being more the people who work with the developers, more like product owners?
Yeah, well, no, they're product managers, meaning they work with product owners who happen to be on the IT side of the house to, get releases, patches, and revisions into the market.
Gotcha. Okay. But they're not really thinking about how buyers buy. And win-loss interviews are all about how buyers buy.
Oh, yeah. See, and that's the other thing is we've added more of the product marketing manager role to these product managers, which directly, like you said, is interested in what buyers personas are doing. But I guess you also, I think another point of evidence is this is really just an industry standard that products do win-loss, not sales.
Well, it is, but I would really, I would certainly tell them that if you want to do this, if you want to organize and analyze, but let's talk about all the questions you need to ask, and the fact that if what you're really gathering is market knowledge, it's not just the negotiation knowledge, even in the win-loss, because
see. Okay, yeah. We did create a question bank that we got off of doing some benchmarking. I like that emphasis. That you're really gathering market knowledge, not just specific to that deal.
Yeah,
okay.
It's so much more than that, and also again, do you really want two jobs? Nobody really wants two entire jobs, and sales, if that's what they really want to do, then come to the product team. But that's why we do divide that labor up, is because we need our sales team out there selling. They're still responsible for being a channel that brings information back. So we never want to tell them that the information they've got is not valuable. It's very valuable. Yeah, it's just not everything. Yeah. So keep bringing it in. We'll centralize it.
I like the way you said that. They are an important channel, but product owns the aggregation. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Alika. We always love when you pop in with questions. And for our friends who just joined us, we are doing an accelerated session today. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We certainly have a few minutes left. But Diane, how about another one or two? You feel up for it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this one comes from Laverne, who wants to talk a little bit about launch strategies. Can you talk about launch strategies as a whole, but more specifically a few weeks prior to a launch when it's important to stay on track more than ever? I seem to be spending most of my time putting out fires rather than concentrating on getting a product of quality out the door.
And this is one of those things. When I teach launch class, I always say, when you look at what we're going to talk about in launch class, it's all, for those of you who remember the framework, it's strategy on the left side and execution on the right side. Launch is very much down there on the execution side. And that's because it assumes that you've done so much of the work in the upper left-hand corner and all the way through the framework that you actually knew the problems in the market, who had those problems, what the pain was. You understand, and everybody else in the organization understands why your company decided to solve this problem and not some other problem. You know who not only the users are, but the buyers are, and how they're getting. You have all this information. You've done some of those touchbacks into the market. You didn't hear something, build it and hope for the best. Where the pain starts to show up, if that hasn't been done, is in those few weeks right before launch. And so unfortunately, by the time you get to that point, it's really late in the process. And if you're putting out a lot of fires, if there's a lot of surprises, if nobody seems to be committed to helping you get this launch out, chances are you're trying to do all the work on the framework right now. So, okay, fine, you don't want to get in that position, but what if you are? So, like, Diane, I get it, we shouldn't do that, but what if we have? Here's the way to do some triage on that. If you've only got a few weeks left, get your stakeholders together and say, okay, first of all, here are the elements of this launch. If you don't have a clear understanding right now of, so let's start with that. So 2 pieces to this. The first piece is ask yourself, do you know what problem this product is solving? Who it's solving it for? The pain that goes away, or the pleasure that they get from it? And do you understand who the competitors are and why you're better and different? If you don't understand that, take as much time as you can, a day, 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, whatever you can take, and find out as much as you can. Then get your stakeholders together and share that knowledge with them and say, okay, I need to know, sales, what you're going to need in order to meet our goals as a company based on this knowledge I just gave you. Get them to tell you what they need you to build, what they've absolutely got to have and no more. Do the same thing with anybody else who's going to be ready for this launch. So let's say, for example, if you need a contract, make sure legal's involved. If you need a pricing code, make sure they're involved. If that's already done, great. But otherwise, get the people together, make your checklist afresh. So throw out the old one, put one together, what must be done, and execute on that. And then make sure that never happens again.
No, I think that's great advice. It's like so scary when it's crunch time and you're like, this thing's got to get out the door. You know, what do we do?
Yeah, the reality is anybody who took class in the past 4 months, it's like, okay, but what about these 5 launches I've got now? You know, we live in a real world, and sometimes this is just going to happen. You come into a new company, you haven't fully implemented yet. This is going to take time. So, you know, it's going to be a little messy for a long time. It's always a little messy. Launches are always going to have some surprises. It's just go back to understanding the market and who has the problem. Put together a very abbreviated launch strategy and find out what down and dirty has to happen to have any chance of success. Get that ready, and then improve on that. You know, back this process up farther and farther into the knowledge and the execution pieces of the product so that you're ready.
Hey, Diane, would you mind repeating the 4 points for the launch? I really liked your answer. You said, who is this for? What is the problem we're solving? How do we compare with competitors? And there's a 4th one that I'm missing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like you're right. So who is it for? What problem do they have? What's solved by that problem? And well, and then the other one is the team, getting the team ready. Was that it? And what do you need team in order to take that knowledge and be successful in the market? I think that might have been the 4th one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What we've done, which, I mean, we've just gotten really rave reviews from even the stakeholders, is we've created a go-to-market checklist that actually is an Excel, and it's by groups, but it has everything from contracts, pricing, ROI modeling, support, account management, services, implementations team, IT and build, deployment, environments. And then we just have, when it's a larger release, when it's like 6 months or less out, we have every other week stakeholder check-ins. And we show that actually it becomes a dashboard. And then obviously we have our offline, meetings, but we already met with the stakeholders, and they actually defined the key activities to stand up a fairly large release. So we really involved them, and we've kind of published that across all the product lines to really standardize it. So then we standardize the reporting.
Alika, I'm so thrilled to hear that, because the checklist by itself won't work, but that buy-in, and I like having and accumulating the checklist just because it does help remind people. But that buy-in piece is the critical, and it's such a wonderful piece because it becomes less of a launch in the box. I used to do this. I will freely admit, my teams, we have to launch this product. Let's throw in a sell sheet. Let's throw in a video. Let's throw in a press release. Out it goes. And we did the same thing over and over again. But if you got the checklist, but you go to the stakeholders, every launch is a little different. That's exactly the way to do it, to not only make sure you've got the right checklist, but make sure you've got buy-in from all the stakeholders before you get down to that 1 week before launch and you're trying to explain everything. Yeah. They already know. They've already got it.
Yeah, and by the way, so we have the standard go-to-market checklist, and then depending on the release, revision, or patch, we either add or remove. But exactly. Like I said, we kind of customize it to what's in front of us.
That's perfect. That's exactly the way to do it. That's great. I'm glad people are enjoying that too, and they're getting buy-in from it too.
Oh yeah, we did like an online forms. We just had one of our stakeholder review check-ins, and we innovated and did like a little online form of what's keeping you up at night, what's your confidence level that we're going to make our GA date. And the GM just apparently loved that he wanted to port that into our town hall.
Yes, I love that.
That's great. Diane, well, thank you. I know we've hit our time, but it's always a pleasure. We always love that you lend us your expertise and your knowledge. So thanks for being with us. And to everybody else, as always, make sure you take that annual survey. You can find it on our website. You can find it on all of our social media channels. It's super important, I think, especially this year, more than ever with everything that's been going on with the pandemic. But But, otherwise we're here, every Friday, 1:30 Eastern, with a different pragmatic instructor. So be sure to pop in. We always say you can come late, you can leave early, but, come in and let's talk products. So in the meantime, we hope everyone has a safe weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.